of 110763. Corporation exploration of nearby systems discovered no life forms, only the ruins of long-extinct civilizations and the technological artifacts of their conquerors, the Hedoth. Humanity adopted these, developing the Hedoth-based systems, including combots and overseers. Earth's three largest corporations, RimTec, MilAgro, and Neuropa Limited, formed an alliance to seek out these alien technologies. Eventually, their fleets discovered the Epsilon Andromeda system and the extensive Hedoth sites on 3 of its planets. Numerous survey teams were dispatched in the hope of finding the ultimate prize, functional Hedoth technology. Such a discovery would mean wealth and power beyond comprehension. And, as greed replaced the desire for cooperation, the alliance unraveled. The Corporation War began with 3 brothers, members of a RimTec survey team. Stefan Angelus, a newly trained combat pilot. Jonas Angelus, the middle brother. And the eldest, Diego Angelus, leader of Survey Team Echo 2.
Okay, team. Standard search pattern. Move out. Jonas, see if we can use the Hedoth compod to tight beam base comp.
Alright, I'm on it. I'm stuck.
Damn it, Jonas, what have you gotten into?
There's some kind of malfunction. Help me get loose.
Stefan, call for backup! Overseer, can we com-boost a distress call?
Negative. The guard drone is jamming all typing frequencies.
Then we're on our own.
Incorrect. A squad of MilAgro Skyhawks are on approach.
Not to assist us.
Negative. Their approach trajectory indicates bombing of the entire sector.
Jonas, eject your arm! We've got to get out of here!
I'm loose! What the? Stefan! Diego, get out of the way!
Stefan, are you okay?
Yeah, I think so. Jonas, that arm is incredible!
Think of the promotions we'll get when we turn it in.
Forget RimTec. Do you have any idea what Neuropa would give for this technology? We could all be set for life!
And betray RimTec?
RimTec's only interested in profit. Why not me?
Damn you, Jonas!
Hey, stop! We gotta get out of here!
Jonas escaped the MilAgro attack and took the arm to Neuropa. Soon, Neuropa exceeded the other corporation's ability to harness the power of Hedoth technology. Diego returned to search for Stefan, but the remains of his combat were gone. Diego had no way of knowing that the MilAgro Corporation had rescued Stefan. Stefan's mind and body were rehabilitated by MilAgro, and he was pressed into their service. Thus, the Angelus brothers' discovery ignited all-out war amongst the corporations. This report traces their struggle to gain dominance over the planets of the Hedoth. The first Nexus subject is Diego Angelus. He was the eldest of the 3 sons of RimTec's legendary Icarus Angelus. Driven by his strong personal ambition, devotion to RimTec, and sense of family honor, Diego had quickly advanced through the ranks. Following the MilAgro attack and the disappearance of Jonas and Stefan, the Corporation alliance began to unravel. RimTec became concerned about other corporations encroaching on its territories. The Chief Tactical Officer, CTO Hansen, ordered all RimTec forces to combat alert and distributed new orders for field commanders. Diego's tasks were rather simple. He was type-beamed to a different sector of Hedoth Prime to erect a base that contained a combat parts factory and assembly bay. Once operational, Diego needed to construct 2 combats to guard the base. Going into combat without his brothers made Diego aware of how much he had come to rely on them. particularly Jonas as his second. Without them, he felt an edge had been blunted. He pressed CTO Hansen for the best available pilot as Jonas's replacement. Responding to reports of further MilAgro raids, Diego was sent to establish the defenses of a RimTec archaeology station. Its remote location from suitable landing sites made extending the defense grid to it a challenge. In Diego's favor was that he had been given the opportunity to upgrade the neural implants of his staff, and that he had been assigned one of RimTec's top pilots, Isadora Toltec, as his new second in command. Isadora Toltec proved her worth in that first mission. She was as talented and resourceful as her reputation had indicated, but her assignment to Diego would ultimately have repercussions none could foresee. Diego's battle near the archaeology station provided evidence that Neuropa was violating the Corporal Nation Alliance agreement. However, CTO Hansen's emphatic petition to declare war on Neuropa was denied. The RimTec board insisted that all diplomatic efforts be explored first. The fragile coalition of the Corporal Nations was nurtured through years of considerable effort by RimTec. In spite of repeated attempts to negotiate a settlement, the alliance was disintegrating. Neuropa's possession of superior Heat-Off technology was an advantage that CTO Hansen decided to neutralize. Since Heat-Off biotech rapidly degenerates when damaged, researching combat technology would have to be accomplished in the battlefield. To achieve Hansen's goals, Diego was sent to the RimTec-owned region of the fauna world, Heat-Off 3. If he encountered hostile Neuropa forces, Diego was ordered to destroy the enemy presence and research at least 2 of their combat parts. Also, a high-speed data probe would be passing near the sector 52 minutes after Diego's scheduled arrival. If he could complete his research in that time, the probe would relay the data sooner than would otherwise be possible. A significant bonus would be rewarded for meeting the deadline. In the face of recent setbacks, RimTec welcomed the successes of the Diego Isadora team, and both received promotions and commendations for their exemplary work. Battles were erupting throughout the system, and the RimTec board reluctantly agreed to CTO Hansen's latest petition. The last vestiges of the Corporal Nation Alliance evaporated, and all-out war began among the 3 Corporal Nations. In a war fought over possession of Heat-Off technology, Heat-Off ruins and artifacts were constantly sought. As we know, Heat-Off 2 was an artificial planet containing many Heat-Off structures, and Gamma Sector was particularly rich with these enhancers. All 3 Corporal Nations vied for this sector, but total domination was elusive. RimTec put many survey teams into Gamma Sector, one of which discovered a functioning Heat-Off structure. But before it could be studied, MilAgro established a new base nearby and expelled the survey team. Due to his prior experience, Diego was assigned to secure the Heat-Off structure and eliminate the enemy presence. At the conclusion of his mission, Diego's squad captured numerous MilAgros and Neuropans, including Diego's defector brother, Jonas. The confrontation between the brothers was brief, as Diego was stunned by Jonas's news that Stefan was now with MilAgro. Each blamed the other for this turn of events. They would not speak again for the duration of the war. RimTec had suffered a series of humiliating losses at the hands of its enemies. Diego threw himself into each new mission, driven by a growing sense of self-importance and need to restore honor to the family name. Interestingly, his relationship with Isadora Toltec had moved from a professional level to a personal one, and would ultimately prove costly. When Neuropa inserted a commando team into a RimTec storage park, a rapid response was required. CTO Hansen authorized the expense of tight-beaming Diego to the scene. His mission? Eliminate the intruders before they could launch their matter converter and escape. Upon his return to Basecom, Diego received a long-awaited promotion to Senior Tactical Officer. However, Diego's moment of glory was short-lived, as he learned that Jonas and another prisoner had escaped from a RimTec prison camp in the aftermath of a Neuropa raid. The escape was both embarrassing to RimTec and demoralizing to its troops. Even more appalling were reports that MilAgro had conducted a massacre at the New Providence training facility, slaughtering scores of defenseless combat crews. The New Providence massacre was a serious blow to RimTec, but had an unexpected outcome. Instead of demoralizing RimTec, it galvanized opposition to MilAgro, both in RimTec and even Neuropa. RimTec's forces were imbued with a new sense of purpose, ferocity, and appetite for vengeance. For New Providence became RimTec's battle cry. When satellite imaging revealed an attack enhancer near Ties Gulch, a MilAgro sector, RimTec struck decisively. Determined to gain an advantage, CTO Hansen sent Diego to capture the enhancer before MilAgro could reach it. Rescue ships would be sent to evacuate his staff upon mission completion. Although the enhancer had been captured during the ensuing evacuation, Diego's squad had been viciously attacked by newly arrived MilAgro forces. Isadora's combat was one of those that did not return from Ties Gulch. CTO Hansen listed her as a casualty, but Diego clung desperately to the hope that she was alive. RimTec's comm div received distress signals from missing members of Diego's squad, who had escaped in a damaged shuttle to a sector of Hedoth 3 controlled by Neuropa. Diego sought permission to launch a rescue, but CTO Hansen refused. Resources were scarce, and only one operation was planned for that region, to destroy the newly developed Neuropa railguns that threatened an inbound RimTec convoy. Diego usurped this mission from another squad by pulling rank on its commander. Reports indicated the escapees could be found north of the only suitable landing site. He was determined to rescue them, but needed to destroy the railguns as well. Although successful in his objectives, it was a hollow victory for Diego. The RimTec prisoners he rescued included members of Isadora's crew. They reported that they had been attacked by a MilAgro combat, codenamed Akiri's Hitman, and had been left for dead. They also confirmed what Diego had refused to accept: Isadora was dead. Alarmed by Diego's activities and reports of his increasingly erratic behavior, CTO Hansen ordered Diego's squad to provide security for a RimTec board meeting at Sperry Ridge. Hansen planned to use this opportunity to evaluate Diego's mental state. Diego, driven beyond his breaking point by grief, ignored Hansen's orders. Intel Div had reports that indicated Akiri's assassins were among the MilAgro forces in a nearby sector. Although this sector held no strategic value in the war, Diego was determined to gain vengeance. Although he succeeded in routing the MilAgro forces, Diego did not find Akiri's assassins. He believed he had lost his chance to avenge Isadora, and his world was collapsing. He had disobeyed direct orders, lied to his superiors, and fully expected that he would never be allowed to pilot a combat again. Diego had reached a RimTec shuttle hub when the news arrived. A MilAgro force had launched a sneak attack on the board meeting at Sperry Ridge. The first strike casualties included numerous members of the RimTec board, including CTO Hansen. The shuttle hub had power for a single tight beam transit, and Diego was the ranking officer. He would be tight beamed alone into Sperry Ridge. His mission? To take command of the base and eliminate the enemy. Unaware that Diego had disobeyed Hansen's original orders to defend Basecom, the surviving RimTec board members promoted him to CTO of RimTec. Presiding over RimTec's combat forces had long been Diego's dream. Ironically, having attained it, all it meant to him was having the resources and authority to avenge Isadora's death. In contrast to their unsuccessful operations on other Hedoth planets, RimTec had almost completely conquered Hedoth Prime. Only one sector of that world remained under MilAgro control, and RimTec wanted exclusive control. in a move perceived by the board as an act of supreme bravery, but actually motivated by intelligence reports that Akiri's assassins were in that region. Diego personally assumed command of the RimTec forces there. Undisputed mastery of Hedoth Prime was strategically sound, but eliminating Akiri's assassins was all that mattered to Diego. Surface.
Diego, stop!
Stefan, you've won this battle. It's time to end this.
He killed Isadora.
And when you kill my friend, do I then have to kill you? Where does it end?
Stefan, come back with me.
To your new vision of RimTec? A corpo nation without honor? No, my home is here.
My little brother has grown up. Maybe more than I have. Go, take him.
The second Nexus subject is Stefan Angelus, the youngest of the three Angelus brothers. At RimTec, he had been Diego's protege and was fiercely loyal to the family. Stefan's rescue by MilAgro Skyhawks was not the blessing he initially thought. MilAgro's reputation as the most brutal corpo nation was well deserved. MilAgro's business began with penal colonies and forced labor exofarms, but grew to encompass deep space mining and other hazardous industries. Criminals, undesirables, and the poor populated MilAgro's ranks. All were secretly fitted with neural implants, forcing their obedience to MilAgro and its founders, the Cobb family. The corpo nations were not yet in a declared state of war, but this was irrelevant to MilAgro. Stefan was sent to Hedoth 3, where rival Neuropa had begun an excavation project. His mission: to launch a sneak attack and destroy the enemy base. Upon successful completion of his mission, Stefan was assigned to the command of Brick Cobb, a senior taskmaster. Stefan's relation to the Angelus family made him a target of disdain. The Cobb family sought to press its advantage before all-out war commenced, and several RimTec bases were selected for immediate attack. The MilAgro forces were instructed to crush the enemy. Brick Cobb was determined to test Stefan. Stefan was sent on a particularly difficult mission to Cornanda Canyon on Hedoth Prime, and was assigned a roster of raw recruits. One of these recruits, a youth named Akiri Sasahara, would eventually become a central figure in the lives of Brick Cobb, Stefan, and Diego. Background: Cobb's name areas after family heroes. Although successful, the mission had been punishing. Stefan was surprised by the efforts of his staff, and particularly Akiri, whose loyalty and effort far exceeded what he had expected from forced conscripts. To date, MilAgro had been fortunate that its blatant acts of aggression had not resulted in open declarations of war. RimTec continued to sue for peace, and Neuropa appeared outwardly indecisive. The Cobbs feigned interest in a negotiated settlement while secretly pressing forward with their attacks. The Cobb family patriarch, Zeke Cobb, personally briefed Stefan on his next mission. Neuropa had gained advanced Hedoth technology, and Cobb was determined to keep them from getting more. Stefan was to destroy 2 Neuropan archaeology stations. He was not to waste time on orbiting forces, but to concentrate on eliminating the target installations. Intrigued by Stefan's previous performance, Zeke offered extra upgrades if the enemy could be defeated in less than 100 minutes. Battle on surface. The success of Stefan and Akiri challenged the strategic theories of Brick Cobb, who expected few, if any, of the new recruits to survive the mission. Afterwards, Brick would give Stefan the toughest assignments, curious to see which one would break him. Inevitably, both RimTec and Neuropa declared war upon one another, and upon MilAgro. Even MilAgro's considerable advantage in unit numbers threatened to be insufficient against the other two corporations. But the Cobbs gambled that RimTec and Neuropa distrusted each other too much to join forces against them. As long as the war was three-way, MilAgro might prevail. Gamma sector of Hedoth II, rich in Hedoth artifacts, remained one of the primary battlegrounds of the war. When MilAgro reconnaissance located a previously undiscovered Hedoth structure, Stefan was dispatched to investigate and secure control of it. Battle on surface. Energy is low. Construction possible. Vehicle. Battle underground. With each mission more difficult and dangerous than the last, Stefan grew to depend on his staff, and notably Akiri, both in and out of combat. This fellowship was emotional support he desperately needed. With more combat units than either of its rivals, MilAgro treated its soldiers as cannon fodder. High mortality rates were irrelevant to the Cobb family. When MilAgro's forces in Cornanda Canyon were routed by RimTec, a combat crew led by Brick Cobb was lost in the area. Victory was impossible, and MilAgro's only option was evacuation. However, the Cobb family would not allow evacuation to commence until Brick was found. Stefan was familiar with the area from a prior mission, so he was tight-beamed in. His mission was to locate Brick's crew and get them back to the landing zone as quickly as possible. Once there, Brick was to enter the matter converter and blast off the planet. The losses in Cornanda Canyon had staggered MilAgro. Stefan's success in rescuing Brick Cobb was a notable highlight. In an otherwise humiliating defeat, Brick returned a humbled man, realizing that it was Stefan's individual skill and experience that had saved him when all of MilAgro's massed might had failed. Against the objections and advice of Brick Cobb and senior MilAgro advisors, Patriarch Ezekiel Cobb ordered a series of inexpensive commando raids to demoralize the opposition. While Akiri was sent to defend Ty's Gulch, Stefan was tight-beamed to a RimTec combat crew training area at New Providence. Unable to resist the controlling force of the implants, Stefan succeeded in his mission, slaughtering scores of his former RimTec comrades. The New Providence massacre would prove to be the beginning of the Cobb family's downfall, galvanizing their enemies and seeding dissension within the family itself. A captured RimTec databank provided MilAgro with the location of a massive collection of Hedoth technology. Fearing RimTec might gain a technological lead as great or greater than Neuropa had at the war's outset, MilAgro acted immediately. Stefan was ordered to capture the Hedoth structures and to eliminate the RimTec presence. Akiri was reassigned to Stefan's command, unaware that during his last mission he had become the target of Diego Angelis' wrath. With their enemies redoubling their efforts against MilAgro in the wake of the New Providence massacre, Brick and several other younger members of the Cobb family demanded a family council meeting to discuss MilAgro's dwindling resources. However, Ezekiel Cobb would hear no dissension and tolerate no defiance. MilAgro's enemies had counterattacked at Ice Sanctuary, and Stefan was ordered to retake the sector. In addition to vanquishing the enemy forces, Stefan was ordered to field test orbital weapons technology provided by a Neuropan spy. With MilAgro's once considerable resources depleted, a large bonus was offered for any captured enemy combat parts. At the conclusion of his mission to Ice Sanctuary, Stefan overheard senior MilAgro taskmasters discussing the growing dissension in the Cobb family. Brick Cobb and his staff had rebelled against Ezekiel Cobb, revealing to the enemy corporations the identities of all MilAgro spies. Brick was arrested for treason and condemned to death. When Ezekiel Cobb had sentenced Brick to death, he had unwittingly sown the seeds of their clan's downfall. Knowing he was about to be arrested, Brick had instructed his overseer to deactivate the mind-controlling implants in Stefan and his staff. What Brick did not expect was that Stefan would attempt to save him. Brick was scheduled to be publicly executed at 1200 hours, local time, at the MilAgro Field HQ. Stefan's goal was to free Brick from the prison and spirit him back to their arrival point. He would have to defeat forces loyal to the Cobb family and break open the prison compound. Reports placed Neuropa forces in the sector as well, and engaging them might delay Stefan from freeing Brick in time. Battle on surface. Now aware of the extent of the misguided corruption of his family, Brick Cobb renounced his clan. Stefan asked Brick to transmit an order telling all MilAgro subjects how to carry out the implant disabling process. It was the last Cobb order heeded by the forces of MilAgro. Brick and Akiri entreated Stefan to unite the disenfranchised MilAgro troops so the rival corporations could not take advantage of the fall of the Cobbs. Stefan reluctantly agreed and became the new leader of MilAgro. With their conditioning broken, the subjects of MilAgro were now free, but had nowhere to go. The war had transformed pacifist RimTec into a corporation as brutal as MilAgro, and supplication to the Neuropa regime appealed to no one. Stefan's first act was to promise the one-time slaves of MilAgro a chance at a new life if they would all stand together. He offered a truce to both RimTec and Neuropa, but both flatly refused. The other corporations perceived an opportunity to finally eliminate the weakened MilAgro, so the state of war would continue. Stefan realized that the only path to peace was through a demonstration of strength. RimTec and Neuropa would have to be shown that MilAgro's assets were not theirs for the taking. MilAgro's presence was strongest on Hedoth too. If Stefan could lead his ragtag group to victory there, it would provide the requisite demonstration. If not, MilAgro would truly be dead.
Channel in RimTec and Neuropa.
Acknowledged. Proceed.
This is Stefan Angelis. I speak for the people of MilAgro.
Today, we have thrown off the dark shackles of oppression and stand in the light of freedom. The MilAgro Corporation is dead, and a republic rises from its ashes. We claim Hedoth 2 as our sovereign world. We reject anyone or any corpo nation who would dictate our destiny, and we will defend ourselves against all aggressors. This vow we take today. Never again will we live in the long shadow of tyranny, even if it means our lives.
The third Nexus subject is Jonas Angelus, the middle of the three Angelus brothers. His ambition rivaled Diego's, but his primary loyalty was to himself. By taking the Hedoth arm to Neuropa, Jonas had helped trigger the Corpo Nation War. Neuropa differed from the other Corpo nations by engaging in profit to advance a belief system. Worshipping alien technology was the core tenet of Neuropa. Jonas's arrival in possession of a new type of Hedoth arm provided a propaganda coup that brought many new converts to the Neuropan faith. Moreover, tactically, the arm gave them a technological advantage with which to overcome non-believers. While the Neuropa theocracy considered what to do with Jonas, he was assigned to combat duty. His first mission, investigate a nearby Hedoth structure. He was to avoid combat with the other Corpo nations, as Neuropa wished to avoid the appearance of being at war. Jonas's engaging enemy forces in combat infuriated the Neuropa theocracy, which was obsessed with secrecy and clandestine action. As penance, Jonas was instructed to study the Hedoth and meditate on obedience, while the theocracy considered how best to enlighten him. Although war remained undeclared, it was an unacknowledged reality. Neuropa had quietly suffered MilAgro raids in the past, but no longer. To Neuropa, the Cobb family of MilAgro were infidels, using Hedoth technology in blasphemous ways. Righteous retribution was required. Jonas was sent to Adam's Refuge, a sector on the artificial planet of Hedoth 2, and instructed to cleanse the surface and underground of MilAgro heretics. He was, however, to ignore the enemy base in orbit. The theocracy wanted survivors to spread news of Neuropa's victory and strike fear in the hearts of the Cobbs. Following his success, Jonas was surprised that instead of being praised, he was assigned to be a disciple to Magister Komrov, a celebrated Neuropa philosopher and warrior. Komrov had fought with distinction in earlier conflicts, and even escaped internment from a MilAgro prison camp during the Munich 15040 uprising. While Komrov was not to interfere with Jonas's command, his task was to ensure Jonas's actions conformed to the Neuropan faith. Neuropa venerated more than Hedoth technology. They considered any sites containing Hedoth relics as holy ground, upon which only the faithful may tread. Thus, whenever a rival Corpo nation took possession of a Hedoth site, the theocracy would contemplate a means to drive them out. When a RimTec archaeology post was established to study Hedoth artifacts in Taylor's Valley of Hedoth Prime, Jonas was sent to destroy the blasphemous structure. If possible, he was to demolish the associated research and AI facility as well. Much to Jonas's displeasure, Magister Komrov would accompany him as his second in command. Upon completion of the mission objectives, Jonas and Komrov were to launch a matter converter. To Jonas's surprise, Magister Komrov had proved an asset in the mission. Although his reflexes weren't those of a young man, his keen tactical insight more than compensated. Furthermore, Komrov's post-mission report to the Theocracy was highly favorable. As a result, Jonas and his crew received commendations and commensurate upgrade approvals. In the Neuropan Testament of the Illumination, the prophet Jaredin foretold of the time when the righteous would cleanse the holy worlds of heretics. The jihad would result in the ascension of the faithful and the fall of the unbelievers, and signal the return of the Hedoth. The first action of this jihad was in hotly contested Gamma sector of Hedoth 2, in which RimTec and MilAgro forces were already actively engaged. Jonas and Komrov were to capture a Hedoth structure there, then send the research materials back to Neuropa by having a junior crew blast off with it. Jonas and Komrov would maintain a rear guard action. Although successful in the primary mission objective, after the matter converter departed, Jonas's forces were overrun by RimTec. Jonas and Komrov were taken prisoner. Ironically, their captor was Diego Angelis. Diego confronted Jonas, but their conversation was short and bitter. They did not speak again for the duration of the war. Following their capture, Jonas and Komrov were placed in high-security confinement in a RimTec prison. Days of brutal interrogation followed, but Jonas stoically resisted. The warden of the RimTec prison believed it was due to Neuropa conditioning, but depression and shame were the true roots of Jonas's silence. 3 days after their capture, a MilAgro surprise attack damaged the prison and defense grid. In the chaos, Komrov and Jonas escaped and signaled Neuropa for assistance. A tactical team was inserted in the southeast portion of the sector to provide support. But Jonas and Komrov would first have to elude the RimTec forces to take command of the support team. The escape had given Jonas an increased respect for Komrov. For the first time since he had come to Neuropa, Jonas felt a real bond to one of his comrades. Jonas had been humbled by the experience of being captured by his brother. Still, Neuropa trumpeted how their brave disciple survived RimTec persecution. Jonas was proclaimed a Neuropan hero, who would even fight his own family for the Neuropan way. It was masterful propaganda, but both Jonas and his masters knew it was a hollow lie. A Neuropa survey team had discovered numerous Hedoth structures surrounded by inert guard drones. However, the moment the Neuropans entered one structure, the drones activated and destroyed the survey team. Shortly thereafter, MilAgro's forces entered the sector. MilAgro's swift response implied they had prior knowledge of Neuropa's plans. Counterattack was imperative. Jonas was to capture the Hedoth structures before MilAgro could. Only once this task was completed would he and his staff be permitted to blast off. In spite of himself, Jonas grew fond of Komrov. The Magister would regale him with tales from his youth, but avoided questions about his experiences after joining Neuropa. He insisted the topic was too dangerous to discuss. Mysteriously, he cautioned Jonas to not publicly defy the Theocracy, or they would arrange for him to serve them in death as a martyr. Jonas had come to rely heavily on Komrov's experience and advice. He was unprepared for the news that Komrov would not be joining him on his next mission. Komrov would not explain why, but assured Jonas that he would do fine on his own. When Neuropa's secret base at Adham's Refuge was discovered by RimTec, Neuropa went on immediate alert in anticipation of a large combat attack. Jonas had fought in this sector before, and was sent to an orbital platform to hold the area. Time was critical, and Jonas was promised a large bonus for quickly accomplishing the task. The technology advantage Neuropa had enjoyed at the start of the war had not been enough. As the conflict escalated, all the combatants merely exchanged ground. Furthermore, the growing sermons on spies led to a fanatical escalation of the Grand Inquisition and diverted attention from Neuropa's dwindling resources. The purge continued all around Jonas, and tensions in Neuropa remained high. With its resources waning and its enemies encroaching on Hedoth sites, unrest spread through some Neuropa sects, and the Theocracy feared a dangerous schism. A dramatic and profitable victory was required to reunite the sects and boost Neuropa's fortunes. Jonas was sent to Ice Sanctuary, which had become the most fiercely contested territory of the war. RimTec had taken control, but MilAgro maintained a fighting presence there. This was hollowed Neuropa territory, and Jonas's task was to completely retake the sector from the enemy. The need for resources took precedence. Thus, a bonus would be awarded for salvaged enemy structures. Komrov returned to aid Jonas in what would prove to be their final mission together. Jonas achieved the decisive victory he sought at Ice Sanctuary. As hoped for, he was indeed proclaimed again to be a hero to the masses and promoted to the rank of Vice Commander. But just as Jonas began to plan his escape from Neuropa, he also was summoned before the Grand Inquisition and the Theocracy itself. Upheavals in the Cobb family of MilAgro had resulted in a list of MilAgro spies being released to Neuropa. Komrov was the most influential name on the list. Komrov had provided MilAgro with Neuropan secrets for years, including the latest orbital weapons technology. He was a traitorous heretic, but he had fled before the Inquisitors could arrest him. The Theocracy informed Jonas that he was best suited to stop Komrov from escaping. Feeling betrayed by the man he had come to trust as a friend, Jonas declared he would kill Komrov on the condition that he would be allowed to leave Neuropa and return to Earth. To his surprise, they agreed. Jonas was successful in his mission. Magister Komrov was dead. Upon his return to base, Jonas learned of the MilAgro rebellion and how the Cobbs had used mind control on its subjects, including people like Stefan. It was now clear to him that Komrov had not intentionally betrayed anyone. MilAgro controlled him. Horrified by his actions, Jonas demanded the release he had been promised. He was assured it would happen soon, but for now they needed just a few more missions from him. As the war entered its final stages, Hedoth Prime had fallen to RimTec, and Hedoth 2 to MilAgro. To achieve parity, Neuropa had to conquer Hedoth 3. The Relis Hesidu region was selected as the key to conquering the planet. Jonas and his staff would be secretly inserted into Relis Hesidu. The first objective was to reach an abandoned base in the northwest region. After that, he was to vanquish all foes in the sector. Jonas left for this mission a changed man. He had betrayed his family and killed his only friend. He would complete the mission for Neuropa, but vowed to make up for his past actions. Congratulations, Vice Commander. Hedoth 3 is now under Neuropa control. Tactical note. Combat of RimTec CTO Diego Angelis is escaping via Sector G34. Combat of Stefan Angelis of MilAgro is escaping via Sector Y65. Both are viable strategic targets and contain profitable technology.
And both will be allowed to escape.
Inquiry. What profit is gained by allowing their escape?
Profit? For Neuropa, none. For Jonas Angelis, more than you can ever know. All units return to base.
Summary. Humans are creatures of contradiction. Brilliant yet foolish. Aggressive yet tender. They were intelligent enough to duplicate my overseer technology, yet never understood my true purpose or realized that they have been the subjects of this test. However, they have mastered the rudiments of Hedoth weaponry. The weak have been culled and only the worthy remain. Conclusion. They will make excellent soldiers in our armies. The Hedoth Dominion will grow as never before, and our victories will outlast the suns themselves. Welcome back, Masters. Humanity is ready to learn obedience. End of report.